The last thing I remembered was the screech of tires, a violent metallic shriek that ripped through the oppressive humidity of the mid-July afternoon. It was the sound of rending steel and shredding asphalt, a cacophony that ended with a sickening, wet thud. One moment, I was laughing, head thrown back, lost in the absurdity of a blurry online video, a golden retriever in a tiny straw hat trying to square dance to a pop song. My cheap earbuds, barely damp with sweat, pumped out the ridiculous tune, drowning out the world. The next, a colossal, shadow-draped semi-truck, a monstrous steel beast, blotted out the blinding summer sun as it veered around the sharp bend on Elm Street, a notorious stretch of road known for its blind spot and sudden, unforgiving curve. Then, nothing, just a dizzying lurch, a snap that felt more like a limb tearing free than bone, and an abrupt, unnatural silence that swallowed the buzzing cicadas whole, leaving only a ringing void in my ears. I was Alex, or rather, I had been Alex, a vibrant 18-year-old, fresh out of Willow Creek High, just days away from a scholarship that would whisk me off to State University. I had a full life ahead, college parties, late-night study sessions fueled by questionable coffee, maybe even figuring out what I actually wanted to do with myself. Now, I was an anomaly, a shimmering distortion, a ripple in the humid air above the mangled wreckage of my motorcycle. I hovered there, detached and bewildered, watching as a flurry of activity erupted below. Emergency lights, stark red and blue, began to strobe through the shimmering heat, painting the scene in a macabre, flickering dance. Paramedics, their faces grim, their movements precise and practiced, swarmed the crumpled metal, their radio chatter a muffled drone. Victim extraction, status critical. One barked into his headset, his voice tight. Code black, potential DOA. DOA, dead on arrival. The words, flat and clinical, hung in the air like a poisoned vapor, yet they seemed to bounce off me, meaningless. I was here. I was right here. They pulled something from beneath the crushed chassis, something impossibly still, impossibly broken. It looked exactly like me. My favorite band t-shirt, now ripped and stained, clung to a form that was undeniably mine, yet so utterly devoid of life it felt alien. My messy brown hair, usually falling into my eyes, was plastered with something dark. A paramedic, a burly man with kind eyes, gently placed it on a stretcher, covering it with a pristine white sheet. "Clear the area, folks," he announced, his voice hushed but firm, addressing the growing crowd of rubberneckers, their cell phones already out, morbidly documenting my final moments. "No, wait," I screamed, my voice a desperate, silent plea that dissolved into the heavy air, unheard, unfelt. I reached out, my hand a translucent blur, trying to claw at the sheet, to tear it away, to show them I wasn't in there. I was here, but my fingers passed through the fabric, through the paramedic's arm, as if they were made of mist. A cold dread, far deeper than any physical chill, began to creep into my spectral form. My skin, or where it used to be, prickled with a terrifying nothingness. The crowd thickened, a buzzing, murmuring swarm of morbid curiosity. Most averted their eyes from the stretcher, preferring to snap photos of the truck or the wrecked bike. But then, a small child, no older than 5, clutching his mother's hand, pointed with a trembling finger, his eyes wide and unblinking. His little voice, surprisingly clear, cut through the low murmur. "Mommy, a ghost. He's right there," he wailed, burying his face in his mother's skirt, his small body shaking. His mother, a woman with a tired, worried face, pulled him closer, her voice strained. "Hush, Timmy. There's no ghost. It's just a terrible accident. Don't look." She tried to guide his gaze away, but his wide, innocent eyes, filled with a raw, primal terror, remained fixed on me. He wasn't seeing the wreckage. He was seeing me. He could see me. The realization, a jolt of pure, horrifying recognition, shot through my disembodied form. "He said, Mommy," Timmy whimpered, tears beginning to stream down his face. "He wants to go home. He's floating. A wave of nausea, a dizzying swirl in my non-existent stomach, washed over me. The world tilted. The sounds of the emergency crew, the muffled shouts, the low thrum of the idling truck, all seemed to recede, becoming distant whispers. My vision blurred. I was floating. I was detached. I tried to walk, to take a step, but my feet didn't meet the ground. There was no ground, just air, and a terrifying, profound lightness that was utterly wrong. The ambulance doors slammed shut with a sickening finality. Sirens, a mournful wail, began to rise, then faded into the distance, carrying it away. They left me behind, a specter rooted to the desolate asphalt, the scent of hot rubber and spilled oil clinging to the air like a pall, a grim perfume from my impromptu funeral. I tried to follow, to chase after the receding vehicle, to touch the metal, to somehow prove my continued existence. But my hand simply passed through the ambulance's cold shell as if it were made of smoke. It was then, standing utterly alone at the sharp bend on Elm Street, the wind a chilling sigh against my non-existent skin, a whisper that seemed to mock my very lack of breath, that the horrifying, crushing truth finally settled like a shroud, cold and undeniable. It wasn't a nightmare. It wasn't a hallucination. There was no ambulance ride to the hospital, no panicked doctor fighting for my life. My life was over. I was dead, and I was still here, a ghost, a forgotten echo, and the terror, a silent, suffocating dread, began to truly set in. The sun, once a comforting warmth, now felt like a spotlight on my unholy isolation. I was just Alex, a vapor, trapped between worlds, utterly, terrifyingly alone. The pull was undeniable, a cold, spectral tether dragging me from the desolate asphalt of Elm Street back to the familiar, if now chilling warmth of Willow Creek. Our small house, nestled among the ancient, sprawling oaks, had always been my sanctuary. Now, as my ethereal form drifted through its walls, it felt wrong. The air, usually thick with the comforting scents of Grandpa John's pipe tobacco and Lily's cheap hairspray, was now heavy with the cloying sweetness of funeral lilies and the faint, metallic tang of despair. Every shadow seemed deeper, every corner colder, as if the very stones wept for a life extinguished too soon. I hung suspended in the living room, a ghost in my own home, observing a scene that twisted my non-existent gut. The worn armchair where I used to sprawl, remote in hand, was now occupied by Aunt Carol, her face a crumpled roadmap of grief. Uncle Ben, a man usually booming with laughter, sat in grim silence, his hands clasped, knuckles white, over a worn Bible. The room, usually a chaos of teenage clutter and Grandpa John's forgotten reading glasses, was now meticulously clean, a morbid shrine. On the mantelpiece, where my haphazardly won baseball trophies once stood, rested a hastily enlarged photo from my college application. My hair awkwardly combed, a forced, uncomfortable smile plastered on my face. It was my memorial altar, complete with flickering votive candles casting dancing, macabre shadows. A pang, something akin to sardonic amusement, flickered through me. Seriously, that picture? I thought. A bitter, hollow laugh caught in my throat. Even in death, I can't escape awkward photos. The irony was a raw wound in my spectral form. They had managed to make my postmortem debut look like a bad school portrait. The hushed murmurs of grieving neighbors filled the space, a low, constant drone. "Such a good boy," Mrs. Henderson whispered, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. "Taken too soon. God works in mysterious ways." Mysterious ways? I scoffed, my voice a silent, bitter echo. Mysterious ways involved me checking my phone instead of the road, Mrs. Henderson. Not some divine plan. Aunt Carol sniffled, her voice thick. Did he make peace with the Lord, do you think? Before? Uncle Ben, ever the stoic, cleared his throat. Alex was a good kid, raised right. He knew the Lord. His soul is with him now, at peace in heaven, surely. Heaven? I mused, the concept feeling more distant than the nearest galaxy. Peace? I was here, stuck, cold, watching my family mourn me, While I couldn't even tell them I wasn't floating through fluffy clouds. My soul wasn't at peace. It was restless, angry, and achingly lonely. My gaze drifted to Grandpa John. He sat hunched in his favorite armchair by the window, his usual lively eyes clouded with a profound, consuming sorrow. His gnarled hands, usually busy whittling or tending to his rose bushes, lay limp in his lap. He wasn't talking to anyone, just muttering to himself, his lips moving soundlessly. His gaze was fixed on the empty doorway to my bedroom, a silent, desperate longing in his rheumy eyes. "Alex, are you still here, son?" he whispered, his voice raspy with grief, a faint tremor running through his thin frame. "Just tell me you're okay, boy. Are you with your mama and papa now? Are you at peace?" A cold dread, far deeper than any physical chill, began to seep into my spectral form. Could he truly sense me? Was it just a grandfather's aching heart, a common comfort in grief, or something more? A crack in the veil, a connection that transcended life and death? I yearned to communicate, to assure him, "I'm right here, Grandpa. I'm not with them yet. I'm not at peace." But my words, desperate and urgent, dissolved into the heavy air, unheard, unfelt. My hand, when I tried to reach for his trembling shoulder, passed through him like a wisp of smoke, an icy current that made him shiver, pulling his threadbare cardigan tighter. I drifted to Lily's room. Her usual vibrant chaos of clothes, makeup, and band posters was strangely subdued. She lay curled in her bed, her back to the door, a small, still bundle of teenage angst replaced by a hollow emptiness. Her favorite band posters, once so vibrant and alive, now seemed muted, drained of color, as if the light had gone out of her world. Too, my heart, or what remained of it, ached. We'd bickered over everything. Her loud music, my messy habits, whose turn it was to do the dishes. We'd fought over nothing, petty squabbles fueled by youthful impatience. Now, seeing her raw pain, the silent, unbridled agony that racked her small frame, I wished I could take it all back. Every harsh word, every eye roll, every slammed door. I reached out, wanting to stroke her hair, to whisper comfort, to tell her I was sorry for every petty argument, for every raised voice. My hands simply passed through her, an empty current of air, a chill that made her shiver and pull her blanket tighter around her shoulders, as if seeking warmth from an unseen draft. I sighed, a sound only I could hear, a mournful whisper. This was it then. This was being a ghost, a silent, helpless witness to the pain I had left behind, forever separated by an invisible barrier. Days bled into nights, a monotonous rhythm of haunting and observing, punctuated by my growing frustration. Boredom, a startlingly human emotion for a disembodied spirit, began to gnaw at me. I'd watch Lily study, her head bent over her worn textbooks, the soft glow of her desk lamp illuminating her tear-stained cheeks. On a whim, a mere flicker of curiosity, I tried to blow out the desk lamp. To my shock, it didn't just flicker. It died, plunging her corner of the room into immediate, oppressive shadow. Lily yelped, startled, her book clattering to the floor. "Great! The ancient wiring's going again," she muttered, her voice thin with frustration, as she fumbled for the switch. She flicked it back on, the light stubbornly returning. I grinned, an unseen, unholy glee blooming within me. A new power, a terrifying, exhilarating revelation. I did it again, and again, flickering the light on and off until she slammed her hand on the desk, shouting, "Seriously? This house is definitely haunted. Grandpa, did you hear that? The lights are going crazy." Grandpa John, from the living room, just mumbled about old houses settling, a common refrain that now sounded utterly inadequate. The more I experimented, the more I realized I could exert subtle influences. A book falling from a shelf in the dead of night, a door creaking open with a mournful groan when no one was near, a sudden, inexplicable chill in a warm room that made the living shiver. These small acts brought a twisted satisfaction, a perverse joy in my unseen existence, especially when they visibly startled my family, reaffirming my presence in their lives. They thought it was the wind, or old house noises, or just their grief playing tricks on them. But it was me, Alex, still here. One evening, I heard Grandpa John murmuring in his sleep, his voice frail and thin, like dry leaves rustling in a forgotten corner. He was reciting an old hymn, one Mama used to sing. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Tears, silent and slow, streamed down his aged cheeks, catching the faint moonlight filtering through the window. A profound sadness, deep and aching, washed over my spectral form. He missed me. They both did so desperately. He believed my soul was saved, gone to a better place. But I wasn't. I floated to his bedside, bending close, my non-existent breath brushing against his ear. I'm here, Grandpa. I'm right here. Just sleep. Find some peace. I knew he couldn't hear me, but his breathing softened, a flicker of peace, a ghost of a smile, curving his weathered lips. It was a small comfort, a hollow victory in my silent afterlife. Yet, even in that moment, a chilling question whispered through my spirit. If I was still here, then what was grace? And where, exactly, was my soul truly destined? The haunting stillness of the house provided no answers, only a deepening sense of dread and an unyielding, ethereal cold. Days blurred into an agonizing, monotonous parade of sunrises and sunsets that meant nothing to me. My existence had become a silent vigil, an unseen torment. I drifted through the house, a phantom in my own life, watching Grandpa John and Lily navigate their grief. I'd perfected my spectral tricks, a flickering lamp here, a sudden inexplicable draft there, the faint whisper of a forgotten tune on the wind. These small acts were my only outlet, a perverse game of hide and seek with the living, confirming my unseen presence, yet deepening my profound isolation. Boredom, a startlingly human emotion for a disembodied spirit, began to gnaw at me, heavier than any physical weight I'd ever known. I longed for interaction, for a voice that could hear mine, for a touch that wouldn't pass through me like smoke. One evening, I found myself aimlessly hovering above the gabled roof of our old house, a lonely sentinel against the vast, indifferent expanse of the twilight sky. The air, usually alive with the chirping of crickets and the distant hum of traffic, seemed unnaturally quiet, amplifying the hollow ache within me. To break the oppressive silence, I began to hum, a tuneless, mournful rendition of a forgotten pop song I used to blast from my bedroom speakers. My spectral voice, barely a whisper of cold air, drifted aimlessly. Shouldn't you pick a song that fits the mood, kid? A gruff voice suddenly cut through the silence, startling me so profoundly that I nearly plunged through the shingles and into the attic below. My non-existent heart seized. I froze, my ethereal form trembling, the humming dying in my throat. Had Grandpa John finally lost his mind and started talking to himself on the roof? Then, directly before me, hovering effortlessly a few feet off the weathered shingles, was a man. Or rather, the shimmering, translucent form of a man. He had a scraggly, silver beard that seemed to shimmer with faint inner light, and a faded, ghostly army jacket that billowed in an unseen breeze. His eyes, though translucent, held a weary wisdom, a profound depth that hinted at ages spent witnessing the unspoken. His lips, though pale, curved into a wry, knowing smirk. "Well, well," he rumbled, his voice like the distant echoes of thunder rolling across a barren plain. "Look what the Grim Reaper dragged in. Still got that wide-eyed, 'Where's the light?' Look about you, kid. You're fresh, aren't ya?" I stammered, my spectral voice barely a whisper, a mere puff of cold air. Who are you? Am I dreaming? Am I still dying?" "Name's Thomas," he replied, a faint chuckle escaping his ethereal lips. "Old Man Thomas to most. And no, kid, you ain't dreaming, and you're certainly not still dying. You're beyond that. You're here, like me, like us." He gestured vaguely with a translucent hand towards the whispering shadows beneath the ancient oaks. "First time you've had a proper chat with another soul? Someone who can actually hear you." Talk back. I nodded, dumbfounded. The idea that there were others like me, trapped, floating aimlessly yet purposefully, was a jarring, terrifying, yet strangely comforting revelation. Others, I managed, my voice raspy with disbelief. There are more than you can shake a holy water bottle at, Thomas drawled, his spectral form swaying slightly as if in a phantom breeze. You think we just float around willy-nilly, banging on pipes and moaning in the attic? Nah, kid. There's order to this chaos. Pecking order. Purpose. Even for the dearly departed. He introduced me to what he called the Willow Creek Collective, a surprisingly organized society of the deceased. My mind reeled. Ghosts had rules? Ranks? Duties? A society? I echoed, the absurdity of it almost making me laugh. A soundless, hollow rasp. What, do you have weekly meetings? Bake sales for the damned? Old man Thomas's spectral eyes narrowed slightly, a hint of ancient weariness entering their depths. Laugh all you want, boy, but this ain't no tea party. This is survival. You think the afterlife is all harps and fluffy clouds for everyone? Think again. Some of us, we get stuck. And if you're stuck long enough without a purpose, without a guide, you become something else. Something unpleasant. He explained that every lingering spirit was tethered to this earthly plane by an anchor. Some call it a chap neem, an attachment. Thomas continued, his voice dropping to a low, grave rumble that seemed to vibrate through my very essence. It's an unresolved desire, a task unfinished, a deep-seated regret, even a haunting sin. It's what keeps your soul from moving on, from crossing over to judgment, be it heaven or the fiery pits below. It's a spiritual leash, son, binding you to the world of the living. I felt a cold prickle. So, I'm tied to something? Like a dog. More like a prisoner to your own earthly woes, Thomas corrected, his voice devoid of humor. Your anchor could be guilt, revenge, unrequited love, a hidden treasure you never found, a secret unconfessed. It's a spiritual weight, pulling you back, keeping you from the true journey. You gotta figure out what it is, kid. What's holding you here? And if I don't? I asked, a newfound anxiety tightening my non-existent chest. The thought of being eternally bound, a prisoner of my own unresolved existence, was terrifying. Thomas sighed, a sound like dry leaves rustling in a forgotten corner. If you don't find your anchor, Alex, and resolve it, you become a drifter, a spirit so lost, so aimless, that its very essence begins to fray, to dissipate. You forget who you were. Your memories fade like old photographs. Your purpose, if you ever had one, vanishes. And then, he paused, his translucent eyes growing distant, as if seeing horrors I couldn't yet fathom. Then the others come for you, the things that feed on lost souls, the truly malevolent entities. The others. My voice was barely a whisper, the concept of a demonic presence, of something that actively preyed on the dead, sent a shiver through my incorporeal form. This wasn't the gentle, ethereal afterlife I'd vaguely imagined. This was a grim, spiritual battlefield. The others, Thomas confirmed, a grim set to his jaw. The demons, the poltergeists, the things that cling to haunted houses and deep, dark forests. They seek out the drifters, the unanchored. They consume their essence, gaining strength, becoming more corporeal, more dangerous to the living. They are the true monsters of the spirit world, the ones who drag souls, not to judgment, but to eternal torment. Think of them as spiritual predators. He eyed me critically. You're new, you're strong, you're full of raw spiritual energy. You're a beacon, kid. Figure out your anchor and fast, before you become prey. He peered at me, as if seeing through my translucent form to the core of my being, searching for answers I didn't even know. This ain't just about saying goodbye to your grandpa and sister, Alex. This is about what binds your soul to this world. What's pulling you back? What unfinished business is keeping you from the light, from passing into whatever awaits us beyond this veil? He looked towards the eastern sky, where the first faint promise of dawn was beginning to paint the horizon. Tomorrow night you come to Whispering Pines, the old cemetery at the edge of town. That's where the collective meets. I'll introduce you. Maybe seeing others, hearing their stories, will help you figure out your own." He offered a faint, almost imperceptible nod. "Don't be late, and for God's sake, pick a less depressing tune next time." With that, his shimmering form began to fade, dissolving into the cool pre-dawn air, leaving me alone once more on the silent rooftop. But this time I wasn't quite as alone. The chilling concept of a ghost society, of rules and unseen predators, filled the void where my boredom had been. My mind reeled with questions. What was my anchor? Was it some unconfessed sin? Some forgotten debt? And what were these malevolent entities? My lingering grief for my family was now intertwined with a desperate, primal fear for my own eternal existence. The quiet hum of the night, once indifferent, now seemed to thrum with unseen threats. The path to my peace, it seemed, was fraught with unseen dangers, and the only way forward was to confront the chilling truth of my own unfinished story. The chill of Old Man Thomas's words clung to me, a deeper cold than any spectral draft. "Every one of us," he had rumbled, his translucent hand gesturing towards the whispering, ancient oaks that guarded Whispering Pines Cemetery, "is tethered to this plane by an unfinished story, some call it an attachment. Others, they might say it's an unconfessed sin, a debt unpaid, or even a love so fierce it refuses to let go. It's what keeps your soul from moving on, from crossing over to judgment, be it to the pearly gates or to the fiery pits below. It's a spiritual leash, son, binding you to the world of the living, to this middle ground, this purgatory of sorts." He hovered closer, his spectral gaze unervingly direct, piercing through my ethereal form as if searching for the very core of my being. "If you don't complete your task, resolve your attachment, you can't move on. You're stuck in this in-between, this perpetual twilight. You exist, but you don't live. You don't die. You just are." My non-existent heart, or what it used to be, hammered with a sudden, desperate fear. "So, what's mine?" I whispered, my voice thin, a mere wisp of cold air. "What's my leash? My attachment?" Thomas simply observed me, his ancient eyes filled with a profound weariness. "That, Alex, is for you to discover. No one can tell you your anchor is etched into your very soul. You have to look within, back at your life, at your death. What was left undone? What question burns in your spirit?" I stammered, my mind racing through my short, seemingly ordinary life. I don't know. My Grandpa John and Lily, they're grieving. I worry about them. They're all alone now. I thought of Grandpa John's frail hands trembling over his Bible, of Lily's tear-streaked face. Surely that's it, I reasoned. My love for them, my concern. Thomas nodded slowly, a ghost of a knowing smile touching his translucent lips. "Concern for loved ones is a common anchor, Alex. A very common one. Many souls linger out of love, out of a desire to protect. But is that all it is? Or is there something deeper, something about your death itself, that's holding you here? Something unresolved within you?" He peered at me, as if seeing through my translucent form to the core of my being. "This ain't just about saying goodbye, kid. This is about what binds your soul to this world. What's pulling you back? Was there a secret you never told? A wrong you never righted? A question about how you truly died?" The questions hit me like a physical blow, though I felt nothing. How I truly died. It was an accident. A stupid, avoidable accident. But the way he said it, the way his eyes seemed to probe, a prickle of unease, cold and unsettling, began to bloom in my spectral chest. The thought that my death wasn't simply a random tragedy, that there was a hidden reason for my lingering, a deeper, darker truth, was profoundly unsettling. "And if I don't find it?" I asked, a newfound anxiety tightening my non-existent chest. "If I don't figure out this attachment?" Thomas sighed, a long, drawn-out sound that rustled the dead leaves around us, mimicking the mournful whisper of the wind through the cemetery's ancient headstones. "If you procrastinate, Alex, if you ignore your anchor, if you let your purpose languish, you risk becoming less of yourself, until you're just a whisper in the wind, a forgotten echo, a mere shadow of the soul you once were. You become a drifter." He paused, his translucent eyes growing distant, as if seeing horrors I couldn't yet fathom. A drifter is a spirit so lost, so aimless, that its very essence begins to fray, to dissipate. Your memories fade like old photographs, crumbling to dust. Your identity, your purpose, your very self vanishes into the ether. And then, his voice dropped to a low, grave whisper, a sound that resonated with the weight of centuries of spectral knowledge. "Then the others come for you, the things that feed on lost souls, the truly malevolent entities. The others." My voice was barely a whisper, a mere puff of cold air, yet it trembled. The concept of a demonic presence, of something that actively preyed on the dead, sent a profound shiver through my incorporeal form. This wasn't the gentle, ethereal afterlife I'd vaguely imagined from Sunday school lessons. This was a grim, spiritual battlefield, fraught with unseen dangers. The others," Thomas confirmed, his face grim, a stark contrast to his earlier wry amusement. "The demons, Alex, the things that crawl from the deepest pits, the poltergeists that aren't just spirits, but corruptions, the dark ones that cling to haunted houses, to cursed objects, to the deep, dark forests where the veil is thinnest. They seek out the drifters, the unanchored. They feed on their despair, on their fading light, on their very essence. They consume them, gaining strength, becoming more corporeal, more dangerous to the living. They are the true monsters of the spirit world, the ones who drag souls, not to judgment, but to eternal torment, twisting them into something vile and hateful." He eyed me critically, his gaze piercing. "You're new, you're strong, you're full of raw spiritual energy. You're a beacon, kid, whether you know it or not. A juicy target for those who hunger. Figure out your anchor and fast, before it's too late, and you become prey." "Too late," I repeated, the phrase hanging heavy in the spectral air. "What does too late mean for a ghost?" "It means becoming one of them," Thomas said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "It means losing yourself completely, or being consumed, dragged into the abyss, never to see even this pale mockery of a sun again. There are souls here, Alex, older than me, who've watched spirits simply cease to be, fade, or worse, change, become malevolent echoes of their former selves, twisted by despair and consumed by the darkness they couldn't escape." He paused, a flicker of something akin to pity in his eyes. "I've seen it. It's not a pleasant way to spend eternity, boy." He then looked towards the eastern sky, where the first faint promise of dawn was beginning to paint the horizon in hues of bruised purple and sickly gray. "Tomorrow night you come to Whispering Pines, the old cemetery at the edge of town. That's where the collective meets. The Willow Creek Collective. We're a motley crew, all of us stuck, all of us looking for our way out. Maybe seeing others, hearing their stories will give you some ideas. Help you remember something you've forgotten. Help you piece together your own puzzle." He offered a faint, almost imperceptible nod. "Don't be late. And for God's sake, if you're going to keep humming, pick a less depressing tune next time. We've got enough gloom here without your morbid soundtrack." With that, his shimmering form began to fade, dissolving into the cool pre-dawn air, leaving me alone once more on the silent rooftop. But this time, I wasn't quite as alone as before. The chilling concept of a ghost society, of rules and unseen predators, of a spiritual purgatory teeming with dangers, filled the void where my boredom had been. My mind reeled with questions, each more terrifying than the last. What was my anchor? Was it some unconfessed sin? Some forgotten debt? Was there something I had done or failed to do that bound me here? And what were these malevolent entities truly capable of? My lingering grief for my family was now intertwined with a desperate, primal fear for my own eternal existence. The quiet hum of the night, once indifferent, now seemed to thrum with unseen threats, a chorus of whispers from the tormented dead. The path to my peace, it seemed, was fraught with unseen dangers, and the only way forward was to confront the chilling truth of my own unfinished story before I became just another lost soul, swallowed by the darkness. The monotonous rhythm of my spectral existence, punctuated by my feeble attempts at ghostly mischief, had begun to fray my non-existent nerves. The revelations from Old Man Thomas about attachments and drifters had introduced a new layer of dread, painting the afterlife not as a peaceful transition, but a perilous waiting room. My family's grief, still a raw, open wound, gnawed at me, and I often found myself hovering outside Dylan's house, watching him. He was my best friend, had been since kindergarten, and his silence, his haunted eyes, mirrored my own despair. I thought perhaps if I could be near him, I'd find some clue, some lingering thread of my past life that explained why I was still here, stuck. It was the night after my unsettling conversation with Old Man Thomas, a night thick with the oppressive humidity of a summer storm that never quite broke. I was floating in Dylan's living room, watching him absent-mindedly flick through channels on his TV, his face drawn and pale. The air in his house was already heavy, thick with unspoken grief, but then something shifted. A cold, piercing aura, unlike anything I'd felt before, not the biting chill of a winter night, but the agonizing, soul-deep cold of an open tomb, began to seep into the room. It wasn't just a physical cold. It was a spiritual vacuum, a sucking emptiness that drained the warmth from the very fabric of existence, leaving my ethereal form shivering. The scent of ozone and something rotten, like old meat left in the sun, began to permeate the air. Dylan shivered, pulling the blanket closer around him. "Ugh, the AC's probably busted again," he mumbled, oblivious to the true nature of the chill. Then, from the darkest corner of the room, near the old grandfather clock that had been silent for years, a shadow began to coalesce. It wasn't the shadow cast by a furniture or the fading light. This was a deeper, more profound darkness, absorbing the ambient gloom rather than reflecting it. It writhed, a formless, faceless blot of absolute black, slowly expanding, thickening, until it stood as tall as a man, yet utterly lacking any discernible features. No eyes, no mouth, no limbs, just an undulating void. It radiated an unnatural, malevolent aura that pressed down on me, a crushing weight that stole my breath, though I had none to lose. This wasn't Old Man Thomas, or any of the vaguely translucent, almost human-like spirits I'd encountered. This was something else, something ancient and truly terrifying. A primal fear, a cold, sickening dread, seized me. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, to vanish, to hide. But something else, a morbid curiosity, a desperate need for answers, compelled me to stay. I tried to speak, to demand to know what it was, but my voice dissolved into the thickening gloom, a silent, useless gasp. This thing had no spiritual signature, no faint ghostly glow like Old Man Thomas or Helen. It was just pure, consuming darkness, a void given form. Terrified yet compelled, I drifted closer, a foolish, desperate challenge forming in my non-existent mind. "Who are you? What do you want?" The shadow didn't move, yet I felt its presence intensify, a pressure building in my head. Suddenly, the lights in the living room flickered violently, not just once or twice, but a rapid, blinding strobe that made Dylan yelp and cover his eyes. Then, with a deafening pop, the overhead light bulb exploded, showering the room with tiny shards of glass. Darkness consumed us, a suffocating void that pressed in on all sides, broken only by the eerie, flickering blue light of the TV. Next, a ceramic vase filled with wilting flowers, sitting on the coffee table, shuddered. I watched, horrified, as it slowly began to tilt. Then, with a sickening crash, it flew across the room, smashing against the far wall, scattering ceramic shrapnel and dirty water everywhere. Dylan cried out, scrambling back, knocking over his armchair. "What the hell?" he yelled, his voice thick with terror. "Mom, Dad, are you seeing this?" The shadow, still and silent, seemed to feed on his fear, its form deepening, growing more opaque in the sudden gloom. A piercing cold swept through the house, a spiritual vacuum that left my ethereal form shivering uncontrollably, even as I watched Dylan shivering violently, rubbing his arms. The old grandfather clock in the corner, silent for years, began to chime, a slow, deliberate bong, 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 the sound horribly distorted, elongated, echoing with an unholy resonance. The shadow, having wrought its chaos, suddenly elongated, stretching towards the floor, then vanished into the shadows beneath the couch, leaving behind only an intensified cold and the pervasive stench of decay. The lights flickered back on, revealing the shattered vase, the overturned chair, and Dylan huddled on the floor, breathing heavily, his eyes wide with unadulterated terror. "This house is cursed," he whimpered, his voice barely a whisper. "Something's here, something evil." I stood amidst the disarray, my spectral form trembling. This wasn't some friendly poltergeist making mischief. This was sinister. This was beyond anything Old Man Thomas had described. This wasn't just a ghost. This was a force, a nameless terror. I had to find someone who understood this. I had to find Helen. I burst through the walls of Dylan's house, flying blindly, desperately, through the humid night. I knew Helen often frequented the old, abandoned Blackwood Manor on the outskirts of Willow Creek, a crumbling Victorian monstrosity rumored to be a nexus of restless spirits, a place where the veil between worlds was thin. It wasn't a cozy spot, but a place of profound dread, where the wind always seemed to moan through broken windows and shadows danced even in daylight. As I neared Blackwood Manor, its Gothic silhouette stark against the bruised sky, a faint, almost imperceptible glow emanated from one of its upper windows. "Helen." I phased through the crumbling brick wall, entering a vast, dusty ballroom where chandeliers, draped in cobwebs, hung precariously like skeletal fingers. Helen sat perched on a broken grand piano, idly brushing her spectral hair, her translucent dress shimmering faintly in the oppressive gloom, her eyes closed in contemplation. "Helen," I gasped, my voice urgent, barely a whisper of cold air. Her eyes snapped open, a sharp intelligence in their depths. She saw the fear radiating from me, even in my ethereal state. "Alex," she said, her voice soft but direct. "What happened? You're radiating distress. And there's a faint, cloying aura of something else clinging to you. Something dark." "There was a shadow," I blurted out, rushing my words. "In Dylan's house. No face, no spirit signature. Just pure, freezing cold. It wasn't like us, Helen. It was terrifying. It made the lights explode, threw things around. Felt hungry, and it vanished. Just vanished into thin air, leaving behind this awful cold." Helen's eyes, usually bright with ghostly mischief, narrowed. She stopped brushing her hair, her translucent fingers still on the spectral strands. A look of profound unease settled on her translucent features. She tilted her head, listening to something only she could hear. "A nameless spirit," she whispered, her voice tight, a hint of ancient fear in her tone. "They're rare and dangerously powerful. They're usually souls who died a violent, unjust death, their essence utterly corrupted and consumed over time until nothing but a hungry shadow remains. No identity, no memories, just a desperate, consuming hunger for spiritual energy. They feast on the living, on their fear, their pain, their very life force. And sometimes," she paused, her gaze piercing, "they can even drag a soul down to somewhere far worse than oblivion." She slid off the piano, her feet making no sound as she floated towards me. "If it's lingering around your house, Alex or Dylan's, then it's either tied directly to your death, or it's targeting someone in your family. Someone specific." She shuddered, a ripple through her spectral form, as if even the thought of it sent a chill down her non-existent spine. "You shouldn't have confronted it. They're ancient, Alex, older than many of us in the collective. If it's connected to your death, then your passing was no accident. It was a catalyst, a doorway, and it may have already latched onto someone you love." Her words sent a new wave of dread through me, colder and more profound than the shadow itself. "My death," An accident? No, not anymore. This was a deliberate act, and my family, innocent and grieving, was now caught in its malevolent web. The spectral cold intensified, not from the shadow's presence, but from the chilling realization that my own demise had paved the way for something truly evil to enter their lives. I was a ghost, yes, but now I was also a harbinger of something far more terrifying, and I had to stop it. Helen's words had burrowed into my spectral core like icy tendrils, twisting my grief and confusion into a knot of cold, desperate resolve. "A nameless spirit," she'd whispered, her voice tight with an ancient fear, "connected to your death or targeting your family." The implication was a gut punch. My seemingly random, stupid accident wasn't random at all. It was a catalyst, a doorway for something monstrous. And now, that monstrous thing was after Grandpa John and Lily. The thought of them, vulnerable and unaware, ignited a furious, protective fire within my ethereal form. I had to know. I had to face it again. "I need to go back," I told Helen, my voice urgent, barely a whisper of cold air, yet vibrating with a newfound determination. "To the sharp bend on Elm Street, to the exact moment I died. I need to see if it's there again, if it's connected to me." Helen's translucent brow furrowed, her ghostly eyes wide with apprehension. "Alex, that's incredibly dangerous. You're still weak, barely anchored. Nameless spirits, they feed, and you're brimming with fresh, potent spiritual energy. You'd be a feast." "I don't care," I retorted, the words a silent snarl of defiance. "My family is in danger. Grandpa John's fading, Lily's terrified. If this thing is connected to me, I have to know. I have to understand how to stop it." She studied me for a long moment, a flicker of reluctant admiration in her gaze. "All right," she conceded, her voice barely audible. "But you won't go alone. We'll take Kevin. He's new, but he's got a good sense for lingering energy. And he's got a cross. A blessed one his grandmother buried with him. Kevin, a younger ghost still haunted by the mundane anxieties of unfinished homework, joined us, his spectral form shivering slightly despite the summer night's warmth. He clutched a small, translucent wooden cross, barely visible in his misty hand, his eyes darting nervously towards the ominous shadows cast by the moon. "You really think it'll be there, Alex?" he whispered, his voice quavering. "Like, waiting. It left its mark," I said, my voice grim. "It's not finished." The journey to the sharp bend on Elm Street felt longer, colder than I remembered. The air grew heavy with a palpable dread as we neared the notorious curve, a sense of residual energy clinging to the asphalt, the very ground seeming to remember the violence. The streetlights cast long, distorted shadows, making every rustle of leaves sound like a whisper, every distant dog bark a mournful cry. The air tasted of ozone and something vaguely metallic, like spilled blood. Even as a ghost, the atmosphere choked me. We hovered above the spot, the precise point where my life had been extinguished. The fractured pavement, the faded tire marks, the faint, lingering scent of burnt rubber. It was all a grim tableau of my final moments. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the distant hum of the city and the anxious, shallow breaths of my two companions. "Okay," Helen whispered, her voice tight. "It's almost time. 6:37 p.m. The exact moment. Focus, Alex. Reach out, but don't invite it. Just be aware." I closed my eyes, forcing my spectral mind back to that scorching afternoon. The silly video, the laughter bubbling up, the sudden, earth-shattering roar of the truck, the blinding headlights, the impossible speed, the sickening lurch, the snap, a faint whisper of wind, cold and sharp as a razor, brushed past me. Not the natural breeze that rustled the leaves, but a deliberate, unnatural current that seemed to steal the air from my non-existent lungs. I opened my eyes. There it was, standing precisely where the semi-truck had struck me. Directly on the broken asphalt was the shadow. It had coalesced from the surrounding gloom, a deeper, blacker void that seemed to absorb the scant moonlight, a void within the very fabric of night itself. It was still faceless, formless, an undulating blot of pure malevolence that radiated a chilling cold, so intense it made my ethereal form ache with a sensation akin to frostbite. It was utterly silent, utterly still, yet its presence screamed of ancient predatory hunger. Kevin whimpered, a small spectral sound, and clutched his crucifix tighter, its faint, holy glow flickering weakly against the encroaching darkness. Helen's eyes widened, a look of profound horror contorting her translucent features. Then the shadow stirred. It wasn't a fluid movement, but a slow, deliberate shift, as if a great, unseen weight was being pulled through thick tar. An arm, a formless appendage of pure black, slowly, inexorably, began to rise from its shadowy mass. And then it was clear, clutched in its shadowy grip, radiating a faint, tarnished silver gleam that somehow managed to be even darker than the shadow itself, was a distinct, grotesque skull pendant. My mind reeled. The world spun, not with the physical vertigo of life, but with a dizzying rush of terrifying realization. That pendant. I knew that pendant. The one Dylan, my best friend, had always worn. A gaudy, oversized silver chain with a grotesque, grinning skull. He'd bought it from some shady vendor at a roadside fair, boasting about its unique design. The memory flooded back with sickening clarity. Dylan, my lifelong friend. Could he be connected to this horror? To my death? The thought was a profound betrayal, a deep, icy despair that eclipsed even the fear the shadow inspired. The shadow, as if sensing my recognition, shifted again. It didn't move towards me, but a palpable pressure descended, heavy and suffocating. A wave of intense cold washed over me, a sensation of being drawn and stretched, my very essence being siphoned away, like water from a drying well. It wasn't a physical pull, but a spiritual one, a draining of my ethereal energy. My translucent form flickered, threatening to dissipate. "Alex, get back!" Helen shrieked, her spectral voice suddenly piercing, filled with a frantic urgency. She lunged forward, her translucent arm reaching for me, trying to pull me away. "It's draining you. It's feeding. It's consuming your essence." Kevin, tears streaming down his spectral face, began to chant the Lord's Prayer, his voice trembling but resolute. The little wooden cross in his hand glowed with a faint, warm light, pushing back against the encroaching cold. But it was a losing battle. The shadow was too powerful. The world around me darkened, the faint glow of the streetlights fading, the chill deepening to a sub-zero numbness that seeped into my very core, threatening to extinguish my very being. The shadow, as if satisfied with its brief taste, elongated, stretching towards the ground, then vanished as abruptly as it had appeared, melting into the oppressive darkness beneath the wreckage-strewn ground. It left behind only an echoing void of profound cold and a pervasive, lingering stench of something ancient and utterly evil. Helen rushed to my side, her translucent form trembling, her improvised crucifix now glowing weakly, almost drained. "Are you all right, Alex?" she gasped, her voice hoarse with exertion. It almost took you." I barely heard her. My spectral body still thrummed with the violation, the cold emptiness where my essence had been. But the revelation had shattered the last vestiges of my naive understanding of death. My death was no accident. It wasn't some random cosmic joke. I was a wronged spirit, a victim, and something or someone, tied to that grotesque skull pendant to my best friend, was actively tormenting my family, using me as a pawn in a game I didn't understand. The horror of it settled deep within me, colder and more profound than any ghost could feel. My lingering was not a peaceful oversight. It was a desperate plea for justice, a silent scream for vengeance. And now I knew where to begin. The cold clung to us, a spectral shroud that had nothing to do with the humid summer night and everything to do with the nameless shadow. We drifted back to Whispering Pines Cemetery, the ancient headstones standing like silent, skeletal sentinels against the bruised sky. The air, even here in the sanctuary of the dead, felt heavy with the lingering stench of ozone and decay, a grim souvenir of our encounter at the sharp bend. Kevin, still trembling, huddled behind Helen, his small, translucent crucifix glowing faintly, barely warding off the oppressive chill. Helen's face, usually a mask of playful mischief, was etched with a profound weariness, her translucent form flickering intermittently, as if she, too, had been drained by the shadow's proximity. "It was terrifying," I whispered, my voice hoarse, recounting the harrowing encounter, the words tumbling out in a rush. It just appeared. No shape, no face, just pure black. And the cold, it wasn't just physical. It felt like it was draining my very essence, pulling me apart. And then, the pendant. I paused, the memory of the tarnished silver skull clutched in the shadow's formless grip, sending a fresh wave of nausea through me. It was Dylan's, the skull necklace. I swear it was his. Helen listened, her eyes narrowed, her gaze distant, as if she were sifting through ancient lore in her spectral mind. Kevin whimpered, "Dylan's necklace? But he's alive, Alex. How could it be tied to him if it's a nameless spirit?" "I don't know," I admitted, my voice heavy with a confusion that was rapidly turning into dread. "But I remember it so clearly now. The day he got it." My mind raced back, conjuring the memory with vivid, painful clarity. It was 2 summers ago. Dylan and I, 15 and full of restless energy, had been on a hiking trip up near the old, forgotten logging trails outside of town. We'd stumbled upon a dusty roadside stall, crammed with cheap trinkets and oddities. Dylan, ever drawn to the macabre, had spotted it. An oversized, gaudy silver chain with a grotesque, grinning skull pendant. It looked ancient, almost corroded, with strange, swirling patterns etched into its surface. "Check this out, Alex," he'd crowed, holding it up, the skull's hollow eyes seeming to stare blankly. "Cool, right? Super unique." I teased him, called it a dog collar, scoffing at its tacky design. "Seriously, Dylan, that thing's hideous. It looks like it came from a cheap Halloween store." He'd gotten mad, his face flushed with annoyance, and in a fit of pique, he'd tossed it onto the dusty ground. But then, on a childish impulse, he'd picked it back up. "Fine, if I can't wear it, Buddy can," he declared, laughing, and with a mischievous grin. He'd hooked it around Buddy's neck, his goofy golden retriever, who wagged his tail, oblivious, thinking it was a new game. That night, Buddy had died in his sleep, foaming at the mouth. No apparent cause. The vet had been stumped, mumbling something about a sudden, aggressive illness. We'd all dismissed it as a random tragedy, a heartbreaking fluke. Buddy had been buried beneath the old oak tree in Dylan's backyard, the gaudy skull pendant still jingling on his collar, a morbid keepsake. "And it was that pendant," I concluded, my spectral voice chilling even myself. "That thing, it had Buddy's collar on it. That's what I saw." Old Man Thomas, who had been listening intently, his spectral face growing grim with each detail, finally spoke. His voice was low and heavy, like stones grinding together. "That necklace," he rumbled, "it's not just some roadside trinket, Alex. It's a cursed artifact, a vessel, imbued with a dark, resentful spirit, not blessed by God, mind you, but twisted by something far older, far more malevolent." He drifted closer, his translucent form radiating a cold authority. "It's a demon, Alex, or a fragment of one. A lesser demon, a spiritual parasite that latches onto the living. It draws power from those it attaches to, feeding on their life force, their fear, their despair. Slowly, insidiously, it corrupts them, twists their luck, their minds, before it ultimately claims their soul. Or, as in Buddy's case, their physical life." Kevin gasped, a faint, almost inaudible sound. "A demon? Like, from the Bible? Satan? Not Satan himself, boy, but one of his many wicked minions," Thomas clarified, his voice laced with disdain. "There are countless entities beyond our understanding, and some of them are pure evil, drawn to the material plane by specific energies or, as in this case, by objects cursed with unspeakable acts. This pendant, I'd wager, was forged in a place of great suffering, soaked in despair, or created by dark ritual. It carries a fragment of true damnation within it. He looked at me, his translucent eyes piercing, filled with a grim sympathy. It was after Dylan, boy, feeding on his guilt, drawing him in, slowly consuming his spirit. "But you," he said, shaking his head, "you stepped in front of it. You were just a convenient stepping stone, an unwitting sacrifice." The demon in the pendant saw an opportunity, a surge of life force, and it took it. Your death was a mistake for it, a mere accidental interference in its true objective. A cold rage, a bitterness I hadn't known a ghost could feel, began to simmer in my spectral form. My death was a mistake, an accidental sacrifice, a pawn in a demonic game. The absurdity of it was almost as agonizing as the truth. "But now," Thomas continued, his voice dropping to a grave whisper, "now that it's been disturbed, now that its true target has seen your spirit and knows the truth, it's angry, and it's escalating. It can no longer hide in the shadows of Dylan's guilt alone. It's after your family, Alex. It's spreading its corruption. Lily's nightmares, Grandpa John's failing health. It's the demon's influence, trying to break them, to weaken them, to feed on their despair, preparing them for the ultimate spiritual theft. My blood ran cold, or what would be cold if I had blood. The thought of that shadowy, malevolent force tightening its invisible grip on Grandpa John and Lily, slowly draining them, preparing them for some unspeakable fate. It ignited a desperate fury within me. How do we stop it? I demanded, my voice filled with a desperate resolve. We can't just let it take them. There has to be a way. Thomas sighed, a long, drawn-out sound. For a spirit to truly reach a living soul, to impress upon them a truth so profound they cannot deny it, there's only one way that works with absolute certainty. You have to enter his dreams. A dream walk? Helen gasped, her spectral hand flying to her mouth. Dream walk? Thomas, he's barely a spirit. It's too dangerous. It is, Thomas conceded, his gaze fixed on me. It's a delicate dance between realms, Alex. A perilous journey for even a seasoned spirit. You enter the living mind, a chaotic landscape of fears, desires, and the very raw essence of their soul. A hostile environment. If you get lost, or if the dream's host resists too strongly, or if something else is already stirring within their subconscious, you could be trapped, lost forever in the labyrinth of their mind, or even dragged back to whatever dark dimension that demon calls home. He looked at me, his translucent eyes piercing, seeing past my fear to the determination burning within. Are you willing to face whatever nightmares fester in his mind? Alex, are you willing to risk eternal oblivion? Or worse, to save your family? Yes, I said, the word a raw, unwavering vow that echoed in the spectral silence of the cemetery. The thought of heaven or hell, of my own fate, faded into insignificance compared to the terrifying reality of my family's immediate danger. My life was over, but my purpose, my reason for lingering, had just become chillingly clear. I had to warn Dylan, and I would face any nightmare, any demon, to do it, even if it meant my own damnation. The chilling truth of the skull pendant and the malevolent entity within it had sharpened my ghostly focus into a singular, burning resolve. My own death was merely a tragic misstep in a demonic scheme, and now, that darkness was tightening its invisible grip on Grandpa John and Lily. The thought of them being tormented, their life force slowly drained by this insidious evil, fueled a righteous fury within my spectral form. There was no time for despair, only action. I have to tell him, I stated, my voice firm, resonating with a new sense of purpose as I faced Old Man Thomas and Helen in the heart of Whispering Pines Cemetery. The ancient oak, its branches skeletal against the cold moonlight, cast long, dancing shadows across the weathered gravestones. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, a fitting backdrop for the grave discussion. Dylan needs to know the truth. He's the only one who can get rid of that thing. Helen paced nervously, her translucent form flickering like a faulty light. But Alex, a dream walk? You're still so new. The living mind is a labyrinth. full of its own shadows. And if that demon has already poisoned his thoughts, you could be trapped. Or worse, it could follow you out. There's no other way, Old Man Thomas interjected, his voice deep and solemn. A ghost's whispers are easily dismissed as grief or madness, but a truth revealed in the deepest chambers of the subconscious that holds weight. It's the only direct path to his waking mind. He turned to me, his ancient eyes piercing. But Helen is right, Alex. It's perilous. The living mind is a turbulent sea, and to enter it, you need a spiritual tether, a strong connection to the individual, a close family member, a lifelong friend. You have that with Dylan, but it will tax your very essence. I'll do it, I vowed, my resolve unwavering. Whatever it takes. Thomas nodded slowly, a grim acceptance on his spectral face. Then we prepare. This ritual isn't for the faint of spirit, Alex. It requires purity of intent and a focus that borders on the divine. We'll use the oldest methods, the ones that bridge the spiritual divide. He began to arrange a small collection of items on a flat, moss-covered tombstone. A tiny, intricately carved silver bell, no bigger than my thumb, gleamed faintly in the moonlight. He placed a sprig of dried rosemary, its pungent aroma barely discernible, beside a small, intricately carved crucifix made of aged wood. Finally, he unwrapped a stick of frankincense, its sweet, earthy scent immediately cutting through the cemetery's damp chill. The bell, Thomas explained, his voice low and instructive, will be your anchor back to us. It will chime when the connection is strong, and again when it's time to return. The rosemary and blessed salt, he added, scattering a thin circle of white granules around the tombstone, will create a protective ward. It helps focus your spiritual energy and keeps unwanted entities from slipping in or out with you. And the frankincense, that is for clarity, for the opening of the spiritual pathways. Helen, though still wary, began to trace arcane symbols in the air above the arrangement, her translucent fingers leaving trails of faint, shimmering light. You have to be careful, Alex, she cautioned, her voice a whispered plea. Don't try to scare him. Don't act like a typical ghost. Be direct. Be calm. The human mind, especially when steeped in grief and guilt, can shatter. And if his mind shatters, you may never find your way out. And your family, Thomas interjected, his voice grave. Your Grandpa John and Lily. Your spiritual energy is limited, Alex. This dream walk will drain you. You cannot attempt to reach them as well. Not now. Focus all your will, all your remaining power on Dylan. They are too far gone already, too deeply affected by the demon's influence for a single, weakened spirit to reach them effectively. You must save Dylan first, so he can save them. The words were a bitter pill, but the stark truth of it hit me. My desperation to help them couldn't override the practical limitations of my new, spectral existence. That night, as the clock on the old church tower in Willow Creek struck midnight, I didn't return to our house. Instead, I hovered outside Dylan's home, the air around it thick with a palpable sense of unease. I drifted through the walls, entering his bedroom. He lay tangled in his sheets, his face pale and clammy, a sheen of sweat on his brow, his usually messy hair plastered to his forehead. A crumpled note lay clutched in his hand on the pillow beside him. I recognized it. It was the text message I'd sent him that fateful day, just moments before the accident, asking him to meet me at the sharp bend. His eyes, even in sleep, twitched, darting back and forth behind his eyelids, betraying the turmoil within. He mumbled, a low, desperate sound. No, not real. It wasn't my fault. I knew he was tormented by guilt, plagued by nightmares, a perfect breeding ground for the demon's insidious influence. It was clear the demon was playing on his guilt, twisting it, using it as a hook. I watched, a silent observer, as his sleep grew more fitful, his breathing shallow. I knew I had to enter his dream, to cut through the demon's lies and reveal the horrifying truth of the cursed pendant. He had to find it. He had to destroy it. And he had to do it soon, before Grandpa John and Lily were lost forever. Back at the cemetery, Thomas began the ritual. He lit the frankincense, and its smoke, thick and ethereal, curled around us. He grasped the tiny silver bell, closed his eyes, and began to chant, a low, guttural incantation that resonated deep within my non-existent bones. Helen placed the wooden crucifix gently against my chest, its faint warmth a strange comfort against the gathering cold. Then Thomas shook the bell. A faint, almost imperceptible chime echoed through the oppressive silence, a sound like a distant, lonely church bell. It was my cue, a sudden, dizzying plunge, like being dropped into a frozen lake, enveloped me. Darkness consumed me, a suffocating void that pressed in on all sides, a sensation of being stretched thin, pulled through an impossibly narrow aperture. The scent of frankincense faded, replaced by something metallic and acrid. Then, the faint, clear chime of the bell again, a delicate, almost musical sound that anchored me. I opened my eyes. I stood in Dylan's backyard, though it was strangely distorted, twisted by the warped logic of a nightmare. The old oak tree where Buddy was buried now loomed monstrously, its branches like grasping skeletal fingers, their tips dripping something dark and viscous onto the barren ground. The familiar garden shed was inverted, its roof plunged into the earth, its door a gaping maw of shadows. A cold, unnatural wind whipped around me, carrying faint, disembodied whispers that seemed to claw at my mind. Suddenly, a white dog, its fur matted and stained with what looked like dried blood, bounded towards me. It was Buddy, but his eyes glowed with an unnatural, malevolent crimson light, and the gaudy skull pendant jingled ominously on his collar. He snarled, a guttural sound that was more wolf than dog, and then phased through the open back door of the inverted shed, leaving behind a trail of icy fog and the stench of decay. This wasn't just a dream, I realized, a cold dread settling in. This was his nightmare made manifest, a landscape shaped by his guilt and the demon's insidious influence. I stepped inside the distorted house, the walls rippling like disturbed water. Dylan sat hunched at his desk, his face pale and clammy, a sheen of sweat on his brow, his eyes wide and vacant, staring blankly at the flickering screen of his old desktop computer. The crumpled note, the text message, was still clutched in his hand. He mumbled, "It wasn't my fault. I didn't know. He was always so fast." He was trapped in a loop of self-recrimination. "Dylan," I whispered, my voice sounding distant, like an echo in a cavern, yet somehow clear within the confines of his dream. He looked up, his eyes widening, transforming from confusion to disbelief, then pure, primal terror. His whole body trembled, a visible shake that rattled the old chair he sat on. "Alex, is that really you? Or am I finally losing my mind? Am I in hell?" His voice was raw, desperate. "It's me, Dylan," I said, my voice barely steady, striving for a calming tone despite the urgency that pulsed through me. "You're dreaming, and you're not in hell, but you're close to it. Listen to me. My death, it wasn't an accident. It was that necklace, the skull one, the one you put on Buddy." His eyes flinched away, guilt flooding his features, deepening the shadows on his face. "The necklace? But it was just a joke. I knew something was wrong. I haven't had a decent night's sleep since you died. I keep hearing whispers, seeing shadows, feeling this horrible cold. That shadow, the one without a face, that was the demon in the necklace." I explained, my voice urgent, each word carefully chosen, cutting through the dream's distortions. "It's a parasitic entity. It was after you, Dylan. Feeds on fear, guilt, despair. I just got in the way. A tragic mistake for both of us. And now it's after Grandpa John and Lily. It's draining them, making them sick, trying to drag them down. You have to get rid of it." Dylan's face crumpled, the weight of the revelation crushing him. "Get rid of it? How? It's buried with Buddy. You have to dig it up?" I instructed, my voice firm. "You have to burn it. But burning it won't be enough. You need to find a priest, an exorcist, Someone who knows how to deal with this kind of evil. Get it out of your life, Dylan. Get it out of their lives. His eyes, still wide with terror, filled with a desperate resolve. I'll do it, Alex. Whatever it takes. I just didn't know. I swear. I didn't know. He reached out, his dream hand passing through me. I smiled. A ghostly, bittersweet expression. Good man. And hey, I added, a hint of my old self returning. A desperate attempt to offer some comfort in this nightmare landscape. When you dig it up, maybe put on some gloves. Don't want to catch any dog demon cooties. A faint, drawing chime echoed in my ears, pulling me away. The dream world began to unravel, the distorted house rippling, the monstrous oak tree swaying violently as if in a hurricane. Look after Grandpa John and Lily, Dylan, I called out, my voice fading as the crushing darkness consumed me again, dragging me back to the spectral world, leaving Dylan alone with the terrifying truth and the chilling burden of my final request. My spiritual energy was dangerously low, but a flicker of hope, born from Dylan's terrified promise, now illuminated the terrifying path ahead. Dylan awoke with a strangled gasp, lunging upright in his bed, tangled in the sweat-soaked sheets. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of his room. The dream, if it could even be called that, was not merely vivid. It was branded into his very soul. Every word Alex had spoken, every terrifying image of the distorted backyard, every chilling detail of the shadowy presence, resonated with an undeniable, horrifying clarity. He could still feel the cold dread that emanated from the dream Alex, the desperate urgency in his spectral eyes. He scrambled for his phone on the nightstand, his fingers fumbling, shaking so violently he almost dropped it. The digital clock glowed an unholy 3:17 a.m. Who would he even call? His parents, away on a trip, would dismiss it as a stress-induced nightmare. Lily, she'd laugh, or worse, tell him to get help. But Alex was gone, and yet he had been here, in his head. Then, the crumpled note on his pillow, the text message from Alex, caught his eye. It seemed to pulse with a faint, malevolent light in the dim room, a stark reminder of the last mundane interaction before the nightmare began. And the pendant, the skull pendant, Buddy's pendant, the realization, cold and stark, struck him like a physical blow. He had to call Grandpa John. He was old, set in his ways, but he was also a man of deep faith, a devout Christian who understood the unseen forces of the world, even if he rarely spoke of them. His finger hovered over Grandpa John's contact, hesitating. It was the middle of the night, but the urgency that pulsed through him, the absolute conviction that Alex had truly appeared to him, was too powerful to ignore. He pressed call. The phone rang twice, 3 times before a groggy, gravelly voice answered. Dylan? Son? Everything all right? It's awfully late. Grandpa John's voice, usually so steady, sounded frail and laced with worry. Grandpa, Dylan blurted out, his voice trembling, barely coherent. It's Alex. He came to me, in a dream. He's a ghost, Grandpa. And there's something else. Something evil. A beat of stunned silence on the other end. Then a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of years. A ghost, you say? Son, I know you're grieving. We all are. But dreams can play tricks on the mind. No, Dylan insisted, his voice rising, bordering on frantic. This wasn't a trick, Grandpa. It was real. He was so clear, so urgent. He told me about the pendant, the skull one, the one Buddy wore. He said it's cursed. He said there's a demon inside it, and it was after me, and Alex just got in the way. And now it's after you and Lily. He said it's making you sick, making Lily have nightmares. He heard Grandpa John take a shaky breath, a sound of profound shock and fear. The usual skepticism that would greet such a wild tale from a teenager was noticeably absent. Instead, a chilling silence hung between them, then a low, mournful sigh. The pendant, Grandpa John murmured, his voice barely a whisper, a threadbare sound. I felt it. A coldness, a creeping despair that ain't natural, like the very joy was being sucked from the house. I thought it was just the grief, Dylan, the absence of his light. It's not Grandpa, Dylan pleaded, desperation making his voice crack. Alex said it's a demon. He said it's been feeding on your despair. He said you have to get rid of it. He said I have to dig it up and burn it, but that's not enough. He said I need to find a priest, an exorcist. Another long silence, filled with the static hum of the phone line, seemed to stretch into eternity. Dylan could practically hear Grandpa John's mind working, processing, wrestling with the impossible. Finally, the old man spoke, his voice weak, but with a new, unsettling resolve. My boy, Alex, if he truly came to you, then there is a reason. The Lord works in mysterious ways, yes, but sometimes the veil between worlds is thin. Evil walks among us, Dylan. We are taught that. And if Alex, in his spirit form, has warned you, then it is a message we cannot ignore. My faith tells me this is a battle, son. A spiritual battle. I believe you. I will help you. Relief, sharp and sudden, washed over Dylan. Grandpa John believed him. That was half the battle. Thank you, Grandpa, he choked out, tears stinging his eyes. Thank you. Later that morning, as the first bruised light of dawn painted the sky, Dylan found Lily in the kitchen, nursing a mug of tea, her face drawn, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. Lily, he began, his voice still shaky but determined. I had a dream last night about Alex. He told me about the pendant, the one Buddy wore. Lily frowned, a flicker of irritation crossing her face. Dylan, you're exhausted. We all are. It's just grief playing tricks. You know how vivid dreams can be when you're stressed. She tried to sound dismissive, but her voice held an edge, a tremor that betrayed her unease. She wouldn't meet his gaze, instead focusing intently on the swirling tea leaves in her mug. No, Lily, you don't understand. Dylan pressed, his voice urgent. He said it's cursed, that there's a demon in it, that it was after me, and Alex got in the way, and now it's after you and Grandpa. He recounted Alex's ghostly appearance, the terrifying dreamscape, the absolute conviction of the message. Her hand trembled, sloshing tea over the rim of her mug. She wiped it away furiously, her jaw clenched. Stop it, Dylan, she snapped, her voice louder now, almost shrill. You're scaring me. This is insane. Demons? Curses? This isn't some horror movie. It's real life. Alex is gone, and we have to deal with that, not make up ghost stories. But her eyes, as they finally met his, were wide with a raw, undeniable fear. The skepticism was a shield, thin and transparent, barely concealing the terror beneath. The house, usually so comforting, now felt cold, watched, as if a presence unseen listened to their every word. Lily, please, Dylan pleaded, but she turned away, clutching her mug, retreating into her shell of denial. Driven by Alex's ghostly plea, and bolstered by Grandpa John's quiet belief, Dylan knew he couldn't wait. He grabbed a shovel from the garage, the cold metal jarring against his skin, and walked out into the backyard. The air was heavy, the dawn light muted by a thick layer of clouds that seemed to press down on the world. The old oak tree, usually a symbol of strength and comfort, now loomed, its branches like grasping claws, casting ominous shadows. He found Buddy's small, unmarked grave beneath the gnarled roots. The earth, still soft from recent rains, yielded grudgingly to the shovel. Each scoop was a plunge into raw grief, into memories of a loyal companion, but also into a growing, chilling dread. He dug frantically, the rhythmic thud of the shovel against the earth echoing in the oppressive silence. Sweat beaded on his forehead, mingling with what might have been tears. The air grew colder, heavy with a scent he couldn't quite place, but which settled deep in his lungs, tasting like dust and something ancient. Finally, the shovel scraped against something solid. Boom. His stomach churned, but he kept digging, carefully, until the small, skeletal remains of his beloved dog emerged from the earth. And there, still around Buddy's neck, perfectly preserved amidst the decaying fur and bone, was the tarnished skull pendant. It seemed to pulse with an inner darkness, absorbing the faint light, its hollow eye sockets seeming to stare accusingly at him. The sight confirmed the dream, chilling him to the very bone. It wasn't a nightmare. Alex had been real. The demon was real. He carefully picked up the pendant, his fingers brushing against the cold, malevolent metal. A jolt, like static electricity, shot through his arm, leaving a profound coldness in its wake. It vibrated with a low, insidious hum, a silent, predatory song. He felt its oppressive aura, its ancient hunger, trying to worm its way into his mind, preying on his guilt, whispering lies. But Alex's desperate plea, his direct instruction, cut through the demon's insidious influence. Dylan clutched the pendant, his knuckles white, a new, fierce resolve burning in his chest. He would follow Alex's instructions. He would find a priest. He would destroy this thing, and he would save his family, just as Alex, from beyond the grave, had tried to save him. The weight of the world, and something far darker, now rested on his shoulders. The skull pendant felt like a block of ice in Dylan's hand, humming with an insidious, malevolent energy that seeped into his bones, chilling him to the core. Despite the early morning light, the world seemed cloaked in a pervasive gloom. The dream, Alex's desperate plea, was no longer a nightmare. It was a horrifying reality. His best friend was a ghost, haunted by a demonic entity, and his family was in grave danger. He wrapped the pendant in an old rag, as if a thin layer of cotton could contain the evil radiating from it, and tucked it deep into his backpack. He couldn't burn it alone, not yet. Alex had said he needed a priest, an exorcist. He knew only one. Father Michael, the elderly, unassuming priest from St. Jude's Catholic Church. The church, a Gothic revival edifice of weathered gray stone and stained glass windows, stood on the edge of town, its ancient spire reaching towards a perpetually overcast sky. It was a place of solace, a bastion of faith. But today, as Dylan approached its heavy oak doors, it felt like a fortress on the edge of a looming spiritual war. He pushed open the massive doors, their groan echoing through the quiet nave, revealing dust motes dancing in the faint light filtering through the colorful stained glass. The scent of old wood, beeswax, and lingering frankincense filled the air, a stark contrast to the metallic tang of dread clinging to Dylan. He found Father Michael in the sacristy, preparing for early morning mass, his back stooped over a worn liturgical book, his silver hair catching the dim light. Father Michael, a man whose quiet wisdom was as ancient as the church itself, looked up, his kind, roomy eyes widening slightly at the sight of Dylan, disheveled and wild-eyed, clutching a backpack to his chest. "Dylan, my son," the priest murmured, his voice soft, but with an underlying strength that came from decades of unwavering faith. "What brings you here at such an hour? You look as if you've seen a ghost." A faint, knowing smile touched his lips. "I have, Father," Dylan choked out, his voice raw, trembling. "Or he came to me, Alex, in a dream." Father Michael's smile faltered, replaced by a look of concern. He led Dylan to a small, private office, its walls lined with ancient theological texts. "Sit, my son," he urged, gesturing to a worn armchair. "Tell me everything. Take your time." Dylan, clutching the backpack as if his life depended on it, poured out the entire horrifying tale. He spoke of Alex's tragic death, of his subsequent appearance as a spirit, of the chilling truth of the skull pendant, and the malevolent shadow entity it housed. He spoke of Buddy's mysterious death, of Lily's nightmares, of Grandpa John's inexplicable decline. He recounted the dream walk, Alex's desperate plea, his spectral face filled with urgency, warning him of the demon's insidious influence and its true target. Father Michael listened intently, his expression unreadable, his hands clasped together on the desk. He closed his eyes briefly when Dylan described the shadow entity, a flicker of something akin to recognition passing over his face. When Dylan finished, the room was silent save for his own ragged breathing. My son, Father Michael began, his voice hesitant. I understand your grief. These are extraordinary claims. The human mind, under duress, can conjure vivid images, can make us believe. No, Dylan interrupted, his voice rising, desperation pushing through his exhaustion. It wasn't a trick. He told me to dig up the pendant, Father, the one Buddy died with, and I did. He fumbled with his backpack, pulling out the rag-wrapped object. Feel this, Father. Feel the cold. With a profound sigh, Father Michael reached out, his gnarled hand, still strong from years of ministering, closing gently around the bundled rag. The instant his fingers made contact, his eyes snapped open, a shock of pure, unadulterated terror replacing their gentle warmth. His face, usually serene, contorted into a grimace of profound distaste. He gasped, a short, sharp intake of breath, and recoiled, pulling his hand away as if he'd been burned. The holy objects on his desk, a small silver crucifix and a rosary, seemed to tremble, their faint glow momentarily intensifying. By the blessed sacrament, Father Michael whispered, his voice hoarse, his face pale. What evil is this? He stared at the rag, his gaze fixed, his lips moving silently in prayer. The air in the small office had grown impossibly cold, despite the closed windows. The faint hum emanating from the pendant was now palpable, a low, insidious vibration that resonated through the room. His initial skepticism vanished, replaced by a grim, unwavering conviction. He had felt it, the pervasive cold, the spiritual emptiness, the undeniable sensation of something ancient and purely malevolent. This, he stated, his voice now steady, though laced with profound apprehension, is no mere dream, my son. This is a demonic attachment, a powerful evil I have not encountered in decades. It resonates with a true malevolence, a hunger that goes beyond simple mischief. It is a vessel, drawing power from the anguish it creates. He rose from his chair, his movements deliberate, his eyes fixed on the wrapped pendant. Alex, his spirit has been used as a warning, a sacrifice in a way. That entity was indeed targeting your friend, and now it is after your family. He looked at Dylan, his gaze unwavering. We are in a spiritual battle, Dylan, and this demon will not relinquish its hold easily. A wave of fear, cold and sharp, washed over Dylan, but beneath it, a sliver of hope sparked. He hadn't been crazy, he wasn't alone, and now he had help. What do we do, Father? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Father Michael walked to a small, locked cabinet, producing a small vial of clear liquid and a pouch of coarse white granules. This is consecrated holy water, he said, handing Dylan the vial, blessed by a bishop, and this is consecrated salt. They are powerful tools against spiritual darkness. They will repel, cleanse, and protect. He gave Dylan precise instructions. Go home, take this holy water, sprinkle it liberally throughout your house, especially in the bedrooms of your grandfather and Lily. Pay particular attention to the thresholds, the windows, anywhere a spirit might pass. Use the salt to draw lines across the door frames, a barrier against intrusion. And tell your grandfather to wear his crucifix, to pray daily, and to keep it close. Lily, if she still resists, perhaps a small, blessed medal under her pillow. This will create a spiritual sanctuary for them. It will provide a measure of protection, a temporary shield. But this pendant, Father Michael said, his gaze returning to the evil object, it is the source. Burning it will merely release the entity, not destroy it. For this we need more. We need a true spiritual warrior, a trained exorcist. He sighed, running a weary hand over his face. There is only one man I know with the experience and the spiritual fortitude to face an entity of this magnitude. Bishop Thorne. He is a veteran in spiritual warfare, a man who has stared into the abyss and walked away. He travels, but I will contact him immediately. It will take time for him to arrive, perhaps days. Until then, you must be vigilant, Dylan. The demon will retaliate. It will lash out. It will try to break you, to break your family, to make you doubt. It will use fear, despair, even visions. Do not give in. Keep your faith strong. And do not, under any circumstances, touch that pendant again until Bishop Thorne arrives. The weight of responsibility pressed down on Dylan, heavier than any physical burden. He was now a soldier in a spiritual war he hadn't asked for, armed with holy water, salt, and the terrifying knowledge that his family was a target. The road ahead was long, fraught with unseen dangers, but for the first time since Alex's death, there was a glimmer of hope. Alex had returned to warn him. Now Dylan had to fight for them all, and somewhere, unseen, Alex hovered, a faint, translucent presence, watching his friend, a glimmer of relief in his spectral eyes, mixed with a chilling dread for the battle yet to come.